people. Another beautiful day. Yep. Look, so Sony wants to make Final Fantasy exclusive on PlayStation 5. You know, well, that shouldn't be a shock to anybody. You know, if you've been playing video games, because you know Sony, you know Squaresoft, now Square Enix, put PlayStation on the map. You know, with Final Fantasy 7, you know, and they built a good relationship. And if you want Final Fantasy games, go get them on PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, 3, 4, and now 5. So Sony wants to make Final Fantasy exclusive to PlayStation 5 this generation. So you know, Final Fantasy 7 remake. You know, they put a time exclusive on Final Fantasy 7, the remake. And then, you know, they had put some time exclusive on other games, you know, because they were competing with Xbox, you know. So, you know, this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, you know. And then there was the Avengers situation, you know, where Square Enix tried to throw Crystal Dynamics under the bus, you know, for the issues with the Avengers, you know. So, you know, because you know, Sony was like dangling Spider-Man on a string, you know, because they wanted to add Spider-Man to the Avengers, you know. So it shouldn't be a surprise. So one of the reasons they're also doing this too, you know, is because of that ZeniMax Bethesda deal, you know, because you know that ZeniMax Bethesda deal that Microsoft dropped really hurt it. So you know, Sony was trying to find a way to counter it. So what better company to use than the one that put you on the map, Square Enix. And like I told you, if you want Final Fantasy games, you can find them all on PlayStation, you know, and all of them, you know. So Final Fantasy 5 is going to be on PlayStation. Final Fantasy is going to be on PlayStation 5, you know. And then, you know, the Final Fantasy remake, you know, that it was supposed to be coming to Xbox, but that's in limbo right now, you know, because remember, you know, when Final Fantasy 7 remake came out, they had made a PlayStation, the PS5 had got an exclusive version, and then they add the Luffy story to it, you know. So you know, Final Fantasy 7 remake coming to Xbox is like, but I mean, there are some Final Fantasy games that you can find on the 360 and the Xbox One, plus the Xbox Series X and S. But as far as like from PlayStation standpoint, you know, the only way to play Final Fantasy now is going to be through PS5. Listen to this. It says here, Sony wants Final Fantasy game exclusive on PlayStation 5. Says Final Fantasy games were once associated with Nintendo, as Square Enix released the first 6 games in the series exclusive to the NES Super Nintendo system. However, things changed when Sony introduced PlayStation 1 with Square Enix, jumping ship to release Final Fantasy games exclusively on PlayStation up until Final Fantasy 11 was released and on PC, and Final Fantasy 13 launched for Xbox 360. Since then, Final Fantasy franchise has mostly been multi-platform, with Final Fantasy 14 releasing for both PC and PlayStation consoles, and Final Fantasy 15 coming to PC. PlayStation and Xbox platform, while the series will remain on PC, it seems as though Sony is wanting Final Fantasy to be console exclusive to PlayStation yet again. If recent rumors are anything, if recent rumors are any indication, says here, VG Jordan Midler recently commented on the ERA about Square Enix plans for Final Fantasy. According to Midler, most of the games that Square Enix publish will make their way to Xbox, but it is doubtful that Final Fantasy games will be on the upcoming Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origins Sony wants PlayStation 5 to be the home of Final Fantasy this gen, Medler said. Medler also pointed out that Final Fantasy VII Remake was already supposed to be on Xbox, but that has yet to happen. So, Final Fantasy, Sony and Square Enix, Squaresoft got history since PlayStation 1 because of the falling out with Nintendo being stubborn and didn't want to go to CDs. They went and made a cartridge, and cartridges are limited. So Square Enix left Nintendo, went to Sony, and once Final Fantasy VII dropped on PlayStation 1, the rest was history. So Sony and Square Enix, Sony and Squaresoft. Enix was separate from Square, but Sony and Squaresoft formed a bond. And then once Final Fantasy VII came out on PlayStation 1, it opened the floodgates. When it comes to RPGs, it opened the floodgates, and then Enix was putting RPGs on PlayStation 1, and then Namco and all Work Design and all these developers were putting RPGs on PlayStation 1. PlayStation 2 went through the same situation. Final Fantasy again, So then PlayStation 3 got hit with Final Fantasy again, and it was just Final Fantasy, Sony and Square are like this. Remember, I was telling you, Sony and Square are like partners in crime, man. Husband and wife, peanut butter and jelly, 2 batteries. Can't separate them. So the relationship is that tight. So I was not surprised by this. I knew it was going to happen eventually, because the way they did the time exclusive with the Final Fantasy VII Remake, I knew this was going to come. It was going to come down to this. So it's not a bad thing. It's just Sony and Square are real close. So it shouldn't be a shock to anybody. It's just the nature of the business. So, but good thing Microsoft did that ZeniMax Bethesda deal. Good thing they did that, so they can secure Elder Scrolls 6 to them. Elder Scrolls 6. So Microsoft had to do what they had to do. So, but now Sony is in turn now trying to do the same thing with Square Enix, and they're trying to compete with Microsoft. So it's just competition. So it shouldn't be a surprise. It should be a surprise to some gamers, but the other gamers it shouldn't be, But because since PlayStation 1, man, once that bond was formed, Final Fantasy VII put PlayStation 1 on the map. The rest was history, man. So yeah, and you see what happened with the Avengers game. Instead of Square Enix, because Square and Enix formed Square Enix. Instead of Square Enix calling out Sony, no, they decided to throw Crystal Dynamics under the bus because Sony and Square are like this. So yeah. So when it comes to Final Fantasy games, man, they're all on PlayStation, okay? You might find some on Xbox, but from here on out, they're going to be on PlayStation. So anyway, I'm going to leave this video for y'all to enjoy with the article. Nice talking to you people again. Chris, still Star Wars and Star Trek thing. Dark Edge. Peace.